Hello everybody, we're at ISSO today with a bunch of incredible artists and we're here to talk all things art. Before we get into it actually, I just want to ask you guys about yourself. So let's just go around and introduce ourselves.
Hi, I'm Kavita. I'm the head of creative at ISSO. I do a lot of illustration and a bit of the design work as well. Yeah, that's about it.
How did you get into illustrating?
To be honest, it kind of backtracks to school.
Mm-hmm.
I would just be drawing usually, but I didn't think it would kind of end up being my career. I did get into a bit more of the digital art side very recently.
Yeah.
I would say even when I started working at ISSO. And I would be drawing every day kind of thing, and that's how I kind of ended up doing illustration, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I guess, that's how everybody starts out, finds a passion and then you kind of pursue that. How did you guys get into it?
Hi, my name is Mitara, and I got into art like 2-3 years ago. So doing a completely different degree. I didn't know I wanted to do this with my time, but I finished my degree in England, and I came here and I didn't want to do it anymore, and I was just really tired with what I was doing, and I had kind of convinced myself that this is what a job is, till I came here and I started trying all these different avenues. I was like, oh hey, I was good at art when I was in grade 10, let me try that again. Till I actually fell in love with it. I started watching other artists, and I don't know, I watched this interview where they said animation is basically a job where you spend like 12 to 20 hours in your room by yourself, and I was like, that's it, that's my thing. I'm going to do that. And yeah, that's why I'm here.
So my started story is as soon as I finished school, I didn't know what to do. I haven't thought about what to do in my life. So as soon as I completed O-levels, I went to AOD. I did a foundation course there, and that's when I figured, okay, this is what I want to do in my life. And I finished foundation, and then I straight away got into an advertising, and basically spent 5 years learning about advertising, designing, and then I joined the advertising as an intern, and in 5 years time I was the senior art director there, and so that's how so my dream was to become a photographer. It's a complete different story how from there I became a designer. So that's how I carried on. So I still love designing, so that's how I got to know about ISSO, and then just started working as part-time for like 2 months. It's only been 2 months. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. I think it would be interesting to know how you guys, what drew you guys to art and, designing and illustration? What influenced your perspective to pursue this course? How and what inspired you?
So I think a lot to do with where I found the passion for art and illustration and design was music.
Mm-hmm.
I always found it kind of something that I wanted to get into, using arts and design, because it also inspired me to draw, and I would not draw without listening to music. And also things like gaming, movies, animation, things like that, character design is something that kind of drew me into kind of this thing, because I had no plans of doing art as a career. I was also very heavy on the books, even at school. So I wanted to break out of that, and kind of it was a hobby, and kind of drew me in and decided to do it. Yeah.
That's so interesting. You were talking about how music influenced your work in art. What would you say about music that allowed you to follow something that's in the same field of art? Because I would say music and visual art are both from the same root.
Yeah.
How would you say music inspired you to follow design?
Mostly it was because music does connect people. It brings a lot of people together. And also it's to do with music videos and how kind of concepts are thought about, you know, like the staging, backgrounds, even the music itself is something that kind of brings art in you, kind of you're able to kind of express it, I guess I would say. But yeah, I really was inspired by kind of how things are placed in a music video and how that communicates and relates to the song itself. Even like lighting, colors, clothing kind of plays a big role in what I do as well.
What about you, Mitara? What inspired?
What inspired me? It's interesting you say music because I think music for me as well, but in terms of writing music, I always wanted, if I could pick a dream job, I'd probably pick a musician. Maybe not anymore, but I used to. Yeah. I'm not good, but ish. And that's why I like learned the guitar and all that, because I just wanted to write music. I don't mind being like just writing music and giving it to someone else to sing, but it really communicated how I felt. And I found that very important for me because I used to write ever since I was very young. I would write pages and pages, and I would have stacks of diaries, and I found it very fun to turn it into a song, and people could relate to it. They could put their own perspective into what the lyrics are, and I don't have to involve myself in it, and it felt really nice. I found that avenue with art and animation really because it kind of took me into a different world and takes whoever is listening or watching into a different world, and they make what they make out of it. And once you're done with it, it's not yours anymore, it's someone else's. It's their song or their picture or their wallpaper, and it's not yours, and I found that really nice.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And Infaz?
I honestly don't know what inspires me. It's sometimes could be music, movies, sometimes it could be a place. So when I really when it comes to work, when I'm really stuck, then I just want to get out of my house. If I'm in the office, I just take a break. So I always liked walking on the beach, and that's where I thought I get more inspiration. So all by myself, just think about it, just walk, and then go back to where I was, and then I'll start explore. And that's how it is. It doesn't always music or movies or place. It's different things.
That's interesting because what I understood out of all you guys talking about inspiration was how you perceive things and how you want people to interpret them. And in the same premise about communicating your message and having others interpret it, not just how you want them to interpret it, but differently as well. What would you say, how would you say it's important for you and your onlooker, your viewer, to connect to your work? How much of your perspective goes into it, or how do you connect to your audience?
Should I go first?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that is an interesting question. I think in terms of perspective, I try my hardest to communicate what I'm going through and what I want to convey in the message. And also, I had this thing in my head ever since I was young. I really wanted to perfect what was going in my head through the means of letting it out. So through any of these senses and whatever's in my brain. But as time went, as I said, I realized I can't do that because people interpret things different. People perceive things different, and they have different things going on in their life, and I can't control that. And that became sort of fun on its own. At first I didn't get it. At first I was like, no, that's not what I mean. This is what I mean. But I realized it's really interesting seeing how people connect to it. So I don't really care. Yes.
I guess you let your work take on a language of its own.
Yeah.
And you just let it do its work.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
True, it's because it's also like when you go into do like work on something, and you always need to think about how the message is presented and how people would understand, and at the same time you need to make it look good and then make sure it interests people. Otherwise it's just gonna be a disaster. People are not gonna care about it. So you have to always make sure both things, you get it right, and then you keep on work, do and until you get it right. So yeah, when I start work on something, I always spend more time. It always gets better. It doesn't whenever as much as you spend, it always gets better. That's how I see my work.
Yeah.
I would say that's the thing with design. When it comes to art, the art side of design, it is focused on people's interpretation, but design is kind of communicating that idea, and there's a very fine line because you don't want to kind of put your interpretation into it, but at the same time there is a slight, you want your touch in it, but it's always for the people, and it's always coming up with some kind of solution for the people. And I think it's very tricky when it comes to design because you have to make it look nice. But I would also agree with Mitara, I wouldn't care. If someone wants to kind of see it in a different way, they are more than welcome to. And that's what I think we enjoy about what we do. It's that freedom, that creative expression that you have, and to be able to do that for a living is great.
I think it's interesting because I think there's different types, because if you are say because you design for a particular company and you have to have their characteristics and you have to convey their message to their audience. But you guys are also artists on your own, right? And you'll design and illustrate for your own. How would you say these two mediums are different from each other, and how do they influence the way you think in illustrating and designing?
I think I have an answer to that. So I think part of it is also luck, where I was just thinking I probably couldn't work at a store that uses abstract art because it just doesn't go with the vibe of what I'm trying to communicate. And I think I got lucky with this. So what they're trying to communicate adds up with what I'm trying to communicate. So I think it's important because it's not just art. I mean, not to sound edgy, but it is there's so many different variations of it, and it's really important to know who you're working with and how they want it communicated as well. And as long as it lines up with you and you're not settling and they're not settling, I think that's okay. Yeah. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's for food and everyone loves food. So how do you kind of translate design and art to kind of fit that area, I would say? So yeah, I would say even personal work or professional work, it's very closely related. What you learn in the professional side kind of applies personally as well.
I think we were talking and you said that you are also interested in the culinary side, and how that, and you're lucky to be working so close to these two mediums. How would you say these two mediums have influenced, and what of that goes into your work?
Well, I would say a big part of that is to do with my mom and her love for food. And I grew up watching, food shows on television. And I've always found that to be something that also shows, in terms of presentation, it's all about making things look nice. And if I wasn't doing design, I'd probably go into that side of things, because food is food. Everyone, enjoys it. It brings people together, and we are trying to kind of use design to also have the same message. I think, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting line of thought. It leads me to my next question, because you guys do work with food and you work with design, and you have to essentially bring out the aesthetic value and form of the food into your design. Its shape, color, form, and the shadows, the lighting. How do you bring the aesthetic side of the food in a design? How do you bring something that's real and bring it alive on a piece of paper or on a screen?
I think it's always been a difficult task, because working with food is not easy. You always make sure every single side of the dish, if you're working with a specific dish, you need to make sure people will get it. And also so recently I was working on the menu. So I found myself really, really hard because it's fun. At the same time, it's very difficult when it's come to it. You have to put everything in order and make sure when people sees it, it looks good, and then makes them want to eat it. So that's the difficult part. So you always got to try, keep trying, and then somehow you get there.
I think, as designers working to design menus, especially because there's this concept where if a menu doesn't have visuals, then how do you choose what to eat? I think there's a responsibility on you to, for the consumers to help them choose what they want and envision what the menu is serving. I just want to ask you what your favorite part of designing is. What keeps you here in designing?
For me, it's that random, you're trying to fall asleep, you get an idea, and you just know it's going to be so good, and then you work on it for hours, and that has always intrigued me. It's just because randomly, statistically, that has always lined up with what other people think is cool. And I think that's why you can't force art. You just really can't. Because it works in its own time, and you just kind of have to let it flow through you and kind of just be the paintbrush to what you're doing.
It comes from a true place, I think. It's very authentic, and you just let it flow.
It's also when we work as a team, and when everything comes together, and that's how we know, okay, we are on the right track. Because we always come up with different opinions. All of us have different opinions, different ideas. So we always put together and then make it work.
I was gonna say, there's no one in the team that does the same thing, and that's really interesting to me, because I have no idea about food, but somehow it works, because I have someone like my boss she knows food and she knows art, and then she can relate to someone who knows food, and the team works in such a coherent way. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you guys don't have the same perspectives. Working as a team, how does the collaborative effort influence each other?
I think it's a lot to do with the creative freedom that we have. And we all have the same interest. It works. Even communicating with another designer or someone from your team, everyone gets what you're trying to say and what you're trying to translate into what you want, kind of what you're envisioning, I guess. Sorry, what was the question?
No, but at the same time, like even like Avinash, our boss, like he has such a fun attitude to this, and you can really tell when you come in here as well, like how the things are named, and he's just like, yeah, all right, do that. You know what? That's a good idea, and you don't get that often here, and that's just to add to your point.
Yeah, he completely thinks out of the box, and that kind of pushes us to also think out of the box and be as wild as we can, even in terms of promoting anything that we do. And I think that really works in a team as well.
That's interesting. Okay, interesting question. What would you say is your favorite piece of work? It can be anything. It could be from music or literature, architecture, or a movie or an animation. What is your favorite piece of work, and why do you like it?
As in something we did or something someone else did?
Something that it can be anything. Either you did it or you've seen it somewhere, and that has imprinted on you.
I would say movies. Yeah, because see the amount of hard work that goes into that, and it's visually, like when you see it, you are like, oh my god, how did they do it? But the amount of time it takes, the teamwork, how they get it done, and the end result. And so I always, like, whichever movies that I like, I always try and get the filmmaking part of it, so that I have an idea how they do it. It's so fun. It's so fun to watch, and it's nice how they like come together, and different people with different talents, they all work together, and somehow they just put a masterpiece out there.
Is there something in a particular movie that you think is better?
Not. I'm into Marvels. I watch comics. I don't read, but I do watch. So, and that's I don't know. Maybe it's the animation and the creative side of it that I like. So yeah.
What about you guys?
I'm gonna be super narcissistic and say it's one of my own work. With one of my very close friends, I did a ongoing TV show, and we created the entire storyline, and it was just based off our humor, which was extremely weird. And we would just make jokes to each other. We were like, that's it. That's what they say, and that was it. That was the entire script, and it had it was about 4 wizards. And I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but it was my favorite piece of work because it was just so much fun to make, so much fun to animate. And the first time I drew the characters, I was like, oh my god, I feel like I've known these characters, and I've never felt that way about anything. Because I have that when I draw fan art or when I watch something, I'm like, wow, I feel like I know these characters. And for the first time, I did that, and it was really fun. I don't know if it's going to happen, but it was really nice to make it.
This has been a lovely conversation with you guys, and it has been so interesting listening to all of your thoughts and the way you work in your creative process. And I just want to thank you guys. We've enjoyed a wonderful meal over this conversation. I just want to thank you guys for being here and sharing these incredible insights.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.